right, good afternoon, youth. I hope you are doing well. This is our fifth one. As you can see, Pastor Joe's Chia Pet project is coming along really, really well. You can definitely see where the balding is happening now that I got this little puff patch. I wonder how. I mean, look at that. I look like a jacked up baby. I mean, that's crazy. You know, babies with little hair. Anyways, that's fun. But all right, but like I said, I am not going to shave until this pandemic is over. And the way that it's going, man, I'm going to be one hairy dude at the end of this thing. And my wife's going to be really happy when I finally get to shave it. But enough about the beard. That's your fifth week update on the beard. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're getting through all your classes. It's starting to warm up. You know, I believe it's actually going to be considered in the 90s next week. So whenever you're watching this video, you know, realize we're in, you know, towards the end of April here when I'm talking about this. Well, again, sorry, I got distracted by the yard truck. I think I'm very squirrely today. I think I had too much sugar. Anyways, I digress. So last week we were talking in our Zoom meeting, and I asked you guys, hey, what are some devotions that you would like to hear about and to understand? I got bugs in my face. Man, this is going to be a fun lesson here today. I'm all over the place. Anyways, so some of the devotions that you guys wanted to hear about was on the issue of temptation. What is temptation? How to deal with temptation? Maybe even while we're at home. Well, temptation is an interesting thing because it doesn't matter whether we're in a pandemic, we're out in the world, if everything is normal or everything is kind of off, temptation is part of the human condition. When Adam sinned in the garden, when he took that fruit, sin entered the world, and with sin came death, and we know this. Now, part of that process is this issue of temptation. Now, I want to be clear. Temptation is not sin. However, it can be the road to sin. You could be walking in a neighborhood and you see a road that's going down a certain way. You see that road. You see the name of that road. It's there. It exists. You may even consider going down that road. But if you decide to go another way, you didn't actually travel down that road. It's the same thing. Temptation is like a road that you could go down, and it's going to lead to a certain destination. And it might seem like a great road to follow. However, that destination could be sin, could be death, could be something really harmful for you. And yeah, you see the road, you consider the road, but you're now stuck with the choice. Go down the road or not. Well, just because you consider going down the road doesn't mean it's sin. If you turn and walk the other way, praise God, awesome. But if you go down that road, you will find yourself in a very bad spot, whether it's sin or situation. And so, what does the Bible say about temptation? Well, first of all, let me make something very clear. Temptation is part of the human condition. We're going to deal with it the rest of our lives. Sometimes we're going to choose the right thing. With the help of God, we're going to be able to choose it. Some days we're going to reject God's wisdom and go our own way. And it's going to happen daily. It's going to happen all the time. It's going to happen with small things. It's going to happen with big things. And hopefully we can avoid the big things so we don't find ourselves in a long-term consequence of stuff. We'll get into that in a little bit. But if you got your Bibles, I want you to look up here Matthew 18. Matthew 18 is a very interesting chapter. His disciples were around, and they were actually kind of arguing in Matthew 18 about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. One of the areas that we can find ourselves in is when we think that we're kind of better than we really ought to be. You know, it's like, no, I'm a great Christian. I'm a good person. I blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I'm better than you, you know. And this is a really bad place to find yourself because this is when temptation can really kind of get a hold of you. But at that time, the disciples said, you know, arguing who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus, he called the child and he put him in the midst of them. He says, truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like this child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like a child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Here was the lesson that Jesus was trying to get at. He was saying, look, you have to be like a child, Not in terms of you're out of control or you're just crying over every little thing, not that aspect of a child, but the idea of a child understanding that he is fully and utterly dependent on the parent. And in this case, disciples, you have to be fully and utterly dependent on me. When you can be that, yeah, you are great. Not because anything you're done, but because you recognize that it's me working through you, that you can't overcome temptation without Jesus. You can't be forgiven without Jesus, even when you do screw up. You can't even succeed without him or find peace. This is what Jesus was getting at. And this is where temptation tries to derail us. It goes on, it continues right here in 5. It says, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, but whoever causes this little one who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, he took a little bit of a kind of a, hey, well, I have a child here. Let me kind of explain something to you about a child. Hey, you guys better take care of them because I really have a heart for children. Don't teach a child to purposely turn away from me. You're literally teaching them to go against their nature. If anything, you need to learn from a child. He was trying to teach them in terms of mindset. And he was very serious about it. He goes, don't even harm them. You harm a child, I'm coming after you. Now that's a little side lesson. He comes back and he starts going into this. He goes in verse 7. Woe to the world for temptation to sin. For it is necessary that temptation comes. But woe to the one whom the temptation comes. Now here's again the circle talk. Temptation is part of the world. And it is because of sin that God's grace is able to be shown. But he is also bringing out an aspect about the human nature. He says, look, woe to the person that temptation comes. Why is he saying this? He is saying this basically because we are incapable of really resisting temptation without Christ. That's a fact. Now you might be saying, he goes, well, one time I decided not to do this. I'm not going to get into the idiosyncrasies of that. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not fully you. That could have been anything from a God-given teaching that popped in your mind from your parent. That could have been an influence of friends that actually helped you get through a way. Again, God putting that into your life. But really on our own, we might have the capacity to be good, but it is impossible to be that without God. And so the woe is when mankind is tempted to sin, a lot of times they do it because they find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time by their own making. Now I'm going to get back to that in just a second. Let me say that again. The reason why mankind is tempted is because they find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time that they put themselves in. So let me explain. There's a story that comes to us in the Old Testament from David. David was supposed to be out with his men fighting a battle. He wasn't. He was back at the temple. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. He chose not to be there. While he was out in his palace, since his palace sits high above everybody else's house, he's walking around. Nothing wrong with walking around. But he ends up peering over and he sees this beautiful lady bathing on her roof. You got to understand, everyone used to bathe on the roof because technically that was the most private spot. Unless you're the king in the big old palace that towers over everybody else's place. So he's looking. Now, the fact that he saw a woman bathing, that wasn't the problem. He decided to stay and gaze upon her. So he sees her, and instead of saying, oh, my bad, I'm going to go back inside, he stays. So again, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time that he himself put himself into. And what did he do? He gazed at her. He lusted after her. Then he actually asks her to come on a date. Finds out, I'm going to give you the abridged version, finds out that she's married, wants her so bad that he ends up calling her husband home. Oh, I missed the part. He ends up sleeping with her. And then she gets pregnant. He calls her husband home to try to get him to, lay with his wife. He's a man of honor. He says, no, my soldiers aren't doing it. I'm not doing it either. He's now stuck in a scandal, so he ends up giving him a letter to tell his commanding officer, I want you to attack, but then I want you to pull back, leaving Uriah by himself, and he gets killed. Uriah takes his own death order, to the commander without ever looking at it, and the rest is history. Now, you can look it up in the Old Testament yourself, but what I wanted to show you was this whole setup. David was not where he was supposed to be. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time by his own making. So when temptation came, he couldn't escape it. This is the condition of mankind, and this is where I want to talk with you youth here, is that it goes right on here in 8. It goes, and if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands, 2 feet, and be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes and to be thrown in the fire. Now, again, he's talking in analogy. He's not saying to go physically cut yourself up. It's not what this is saying. What God is saying, what Jesus is saying is, it's better to remove yourself from situations that might cause you to sin. Because when temptation comes, you will not be powerful enough to resist it on your own. So what does that mean? So what does that mean in everyday life here? How does that apply in everyday life? When it comes to temptation, first and foremost, you have to recognize you can't do it on your own. You got to be in prayer. You got to be in God's word. You got to build up that strength to be able to A, recognize when temptation comes, and B, to know to seek after God and saying, Lord, help me, give me the strength to get out of the situation, to not go in the situation, to resist it. So you have to A, be fully reliant on God. B, you got to use your brain. If you know that texting a certain person always goes down a bad road, either in what you send or languages, then you need to stop texting that person. If you know that if you're hanging around with certain friends, you always end up choosing the wrong thing, then you gotta stop hanging around those friends. If you know that staying in your room all day long, you start get tempted to get on websites you're not supposed to, or start feeling depressed or start feeling anxious, then you got to go and be with family. You got to actually flee these things. Joseph did this when Potiphar's wife actually came to him and was basically saying, hey, I'm a good-looking woman, you're a good-looking man, let's spend some time together. Joseph didn't say, well, we could sit and just talk for a little bit and just be friends. No, he knew his temptation, he knew his fears, and he ran. He didn't run because he was the most holy person on the planet. No, he ran because he knew that if he stayed in that tent, he would do what he was tempted to do. This is the reality for us. We need to run from those things that we know we are tempted with. I don't have the time to go through every single scenario, and please feel free to make a comment or DM me or text me, and we can talk, some strategies with that. But I'm going to tell you guys right now, temptation is a force that can really take hold of you. And how do you resist temptation? A, don't be in places where you're going to be tempted. Don't be, in the wrong place at the wrong time by your own choosing. Why? Because your nature will lead you to sin. So how does God provide us a way out of it? Well, A, choose things that are good for you in life, that actually help you seek God, help you to abide in God. And this could be anything from friends to what you see, to the type of music you listen to, and even to the type of actions that you might get yourself involved into. if you find yourself tempted of just getting into depression, because then you need to do things that you're not always alone. I know that's kind of hard right now with our social distancing, but look, we got text messaging, we got phone calls, we got Zoom, we got all sorts of things where we can go and reach out to other people. And even if you don't have those things, then find ways to make yourself busy in doing good. You are given the ability to make a choice. So when temptation comes, don't get down on yourself because you're tempted. Choose to abide in God. Pray, ask for strength, and then make the choice to go after what is good. But if you do find yourself giving in to temptation, which does lead to sin, whatever that sin may be, remember, if you confess with your mouth that you've sinned, He is faithful and just and will forgive you of all sins and purify you from all unrighteousness. Which basically means, again, it's you returning to what He said before, relying on God. Lord, I messed up, and I'm going to mess up again. Please forgive me and help me in the next time. And He will. Well, hopefully I didn't confuse you. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully that helps. Please leave a comment below, or try to contact me if you have any further questions. We went through Matthew 18 here, verses 1 through 9. Another good verse that you can actually go into is also 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 10, and I would read 6 through 12. That's also a very encouraging verse. And other than that, we will see you guys again real soon.